There is a village called Sumeru that sits 4.8 kilometers from Mount Semeru's active crater. In 2019, its population was 347 people. The most recent census, conducted in August of 2024, recorded 612. That's not a typo. The population inside the exclusion zone didn't shrink after the deadly December 2021 eruption. It nearly doubled. Not because people moved back, because new families moved in. Farmers who couldn't afford land anywhere else. Laborers working the sulfur mines on the lower slopes. People who know the risk and live there anyway because the alternative is worse. The danger zone isn't emptying, it's filling. During the December 2021 eruption, Sumeru was evacuated in full. Every resident made it out. The pyroclastic flow stopped 1.2 kilometers short of the village. When the alert level dropped back to 3 2 weeks later, families were allowed to return. Most did. Within 3 months, the population had returned to pre-eruption levels. And then it kept climbing. The government built a new evacuation shelter, 8 kilometers from the crater, in 2022. It has a capacity for 800 people. There are marked evacuation routes painted on the roads. Community leaders have emergency contact lists. International aid organizations provided training on disaster preparedness. On paper, Sumeru is one of the most evacuation-ready communities in Indonesia. But readiness does not matter if you are standing too close. The 2021 flow traveled 4.5 kilometers in 4 minutes. Sumeru sits at 4.8 kilometers from the crater. That is a margin of 300 meters. At the speed pyroclastic flows move, that margin is about 15 seconds. You cannot evacuate in 15 seconds. You cannot even process what is happening in 15 seconds. And the flow that just came down the mountain on December 1st traveled 3.5 kilometers. It is getting closer. The village is not moving. The math says if the next flow reaches just 1.3 kilometers farther than this one did, Sumeru disappears. The people living there are not ignoring the risk. They are betting they will see it coming in time. But the odds of that bet are getting worse with every eruption. If you stand on the main road running through Sumeru and look south toward Mount Semeru, the first thing you notice is how close it feels. Not close like a distant landmark, close like a wall. The summit rises 3,676 meters directly above you. And from this angle, less than 5 kilometers away, it fills half the sky. The upper slopes glow rust orange in the morning light. Volcanic soil and mineral deposits make this land fertile, the reason families stay despite the danger. But look closer at the mountain's southeastern flank, the side facing the village, and you will see something that does not belong in a landscape painting. Gray streaks. Long vertical channels carved into the slope, running from the summit crater down toward the tree line. They are not erosion patterns. They are pyroclastic flow paths. Scars burned into the mountainside where superheated avalanches of gas and rock have scoured away everything organic. Some of those channels are decades old, overgrown with scrub vegetation. Others are fresh, dark gray, and still smoking in places. The newest one, the flow from December 1st, cut a path 3.5 kilometers long. You can trace it with your eyes from the crater rim down to where it stopped, just above the upper rice paddies. The trees along its edges are blackened. The ground is still too hot to walk on in some sections. If you follow that gray scar down slope and extend the line another 1.3 kilometers, it points directly at the center of Sumeru. Pyroclastic flows move at speeds of 100 to 700 kilometers per hour, depending on the volume and composition of the material. Mount Semeru's flows average around 200 kilometers per hour. That is 55 meters per second. To put that in perspective, if you are standing 1,300 meters from where a flow starts, and it is moving at Sumeru's average speed, you have 23 seconds from the moment it begins until it reaches you. Not 23 minutes, 23 seconds. In that time, you cannot get in a car and drive away. Most vehicles need more than 23 seconds just to start, turn around, and accelerate to escape speed on narrow village roads. You cannot gather your family. You cannot grab belongings. You can barely process what is happening before it is over. The 2021 flow that killed 51 people traveled 4.5 kilometers in approximately 4 minutes. That works out to about 67 kilometers per hour, slower than Sumeru's average because it was a smaller collapse. The people who survived were not the ones who evacuated in an orderly fashion. They were the ones who started running the instant they saw the ash cloud rising, before they understood what it meant. Sumeru has a population of 612. The evacuation shelter is 8 kilometers away. On foot, at a full run across uneven terrain, that is at least 40 minutes for a healthy adult. Longer for children. Longer for elderly residents. Much longer if you are carrying anything or helping someone who cannot move quickly. The evacuation protocol assumes 6 hours notice. The geology gives you seconds. The gap between those two numbers is where people die. Mount Semeru has been erupting almost continuously since 1967, not catastrophically, not in a way that emptied the surrounding valleys, just persistently. Small explosions, ash emissions, the kind of low-level volcanic activity that becomes background noise to the people who live nearby. For decades, that activity was predictable enough that communities built up on the slopes. The soil is extraordinary. Volcanic ash breaks down into some of the richest agricultural land on Earth. Rice yields here are double what they are in non-volcanic regions. A single hectare can support a family. In the 1970s and the 1980s, the Indonesian government encouraged resettlement programs in East Java. Population pressure in urban centers was overwhelming. The volcanic highlands, with their empty land and fertile soil, looked like an answer. Families were given land grants. Infrastructure was built. Schools, health clinics, roads. No one was lying to them. The risk was known, but it was framed as manageable. Sumeru erupts, yes, but the eruptions are small, localized. The villages were placed at what was considered a safe distance based on eruption patterns observed over the previous 50 years. The problem is that volcanoes do not operate on 50-year cycles. They operate on geologic time, and Sumeru's behavior over the last half-century was not representative of what the mountain is capable of. In 1976, a team of Dutch and Indonesian volcanologists published a hazard assessment for Sumeru. The report identified pyroclastic flow risk zones extending up to 7 kilometers from the summit. It recommended that permanent settlements be restricted to areas beyond that radius. The report was filed with the Indonesian Directorate of Volcanology. It was referenced in academic papers, but it never became policy. The villages were already there. The land grants had been issued. Relocating thousands of people would have been politically and economically unfeasible. So the recommendation sat in an archive, and the villages stayed where they were. Not because anyone thought the science was wrong, because moving an entire population off land they had been given by the government, land they had built their lives on, was a problem no one wanted to solve. Dr. Sumeru served as the head of Indonesia's Center for Volcanology and Geological Hazard Mitigation from 2010 to 2014. He is one of the most respected volcanologists in Southeast Asia. In 2012, he published an internal assessment of Sumeru's escalating activity. The report noted that dome growth rates at the summit had increased by 40% since 2008. Seismic data showed deeper magma intrusions than had been recorded in previous decades. Gas emission measurements indicated rising pressure in the shallow magma chamber. His conclusion was direct. Sumeru was transitioning from a steady-state eruption pattern to a potentially explosive phase. He recommended expanding the exclusion zone from 4 kilometers to 6 kilometers and conducting mandatory evacuations of communities within the new boundary. The recommendation was presented to a joint meeting of regional disaster management officials and local government representatives in Lumajang Regency in October of 2012. The response was mixed. Disaster officials acknowledged the scientific basis. Local government representatives raised concerns about displacement, compensation, and where the evacuated families would go. The meeting concluded with an agreement to study the feasibility of the expanded zone. The study was never completed, or if it was never made public. Dr. Sumeru left his position in 2014. When Earth attacks reached him by email, he was cautious in his response. He wrote that the science was clear and that the politics were complicated. He said he did not blame the local officials. They were managing real constraints. But the mountain does not care about constraints. In the years after his report, Sumeru's activity continued to escalate. Dome collapses became more frequent. Pyroclastic flows extended farther downslope. The villages remained where they were. On December 4th, 2021, 9 years after Dr. Sumeru's warning, Sumeru produced the largest pyroclastic flow in its recorded history. It traveled 4.5 kilometers. It killed 51 people, most of them in villages that sat within the 6-kilometer zone he had recommended evacuating. Pak Hadi is 53 years old. He has lived in Sumberwulu his entire life. His family has farmed the same 2-hectare plot on the lower slopes of Sumeru for 3 generations. When Earth Attack spoke with him over a translator in October, he was standing in the middle of his rice field, knee-deep in water, transplanting seedlings. Behind him, the mountain rose into a layer of ash-gray clouds. The summit was hidden, but you could hear it, a low, distant rumble that never quite stopped. Of course, I know it is dangerous. Everyone knows. But what am I supposed to do? This is my land. This is how I feed my family. If I leave, I have nothing. His wife and 2 children were evacuated during the December 2021 eruption. They spent 3 weeks in a shelter 12 kilometers away, sleeping on mats in a school gymnasium with 400 other people. No privacy, no income. The government provided rice and water, but there was no compensation for the weeks of missed work. When the alert level dropped and they were allowed to return, Hadi came back immediately. His rice crop had survived. The flow had stopped just above his land. He finished the harvest, sold the yield, and used the money to replant. If I do not plant, I do not eat. The shelter does not pay my children's school fees. The volcano might kill me someday. Poverty will kill me faster.
He's not alone in that calculation. Nearly every family in Sumeru runs the same math. The land here produces 2 rice harvests per year. Each harvest generates about 4 million rupiah per hectare, roughly $250. For a 2-hectare farm, that is $500 every 6 months. It is subsistence income, barely enough to cover food, school costs, and basic necessities. But land outside the danger zone, where the soil is not enriched by volcanic ash, produces half as much. That means a family would need 4 hectares outside the zone to match the income from 2 hectares inside it. And land prices outside the zone are 3 times higher than on the slopes. Economics does not give them a choice. Stay and risk the volcano, or leave and guarantee poverty. The current alert level for Mount Semeru is level 3 on Indonesia's 4-tier volcanic alert system. Level 3 means increased volcanic activity with escalating trends. It is 1 step below level 4, which triggers mandatory evacuations. The decision to raise the alert level from level 3 to level 4 is made by the Center for Volcanology and Geological Hazard Mitigation, based on real-time monitoring data, seismic activity, dome growth rates, gas emissions, thermal imaging. All of it feeds into a risk assessment matrix. The threshold for level 4 is specific. Sustained seismic tremor above a defined amplitude. Rapid dome inflation exceeding 10 meters in 24 hours. Or a confirmed pyroclastic flow extending beyond 5 kilometers. Here is the problem. By the time those thresholds are met, the eruption is often already underway. The December 2021 flow that killed 51 people occurred while Sumeru was still at level 3. The alert was raised to level 4 at 2:46 p.m. after the flow had already been detected. The evacuation order went out at 3:12 p.m. The flow reached Pyroclastic, the village where most of the deaths occurred, by 3:30 p.m. The system worked exactly as designed. The data triggered the alert.
The alert triggered the evacuation order. But the timeline did not allow for human reaction time. Since 2021, monitoring has been upgraded. There are more seismometers, better thermal cameras, faster data transmission to the Regional Disaster Management Office. The response time from detection to alert has been cut from 26 minutes to 11 minutes. But the pyroclastic flows still move at 200 kilometers per hour. 11 minutes is better than 26. It is still not enough. The real deadline isn't bureaucratic. It's physical. At current dome growth rates, Sumeru's summit crater will reach structural instability within the next 6 to 9 months. That's based on historical collapse patterns and real-time deformation data. When the next collapse happens, it could be partial, like the November event that sent a flow 3.2 kilometers downslope. Or it could be catastrophic, like the 2021 event that reached 4.5 kilometers. The difference between those two scenarios is the difference between a close call and mass casualties. And we won't know which one it is until the dome fails. The evacuation plans assume level 4 will give communities at least 6 hours to move to safety. The geology suggests they'll be lucky to get 15 minutes. And the population living inside the kill radius has grown by 76% since the last major evacuation. There's no negotiating with the timeline. The dome is building. The flows are extending farther with each collapse. And the distance between the active vent and the nearest inhabited village is now less than the margin of error in the hazard models. The collision point isn't theoretical. It's a measurable distance, shrinking at a measurable rate. And when it reaches 0, the only variable left is how many people are still standing inside the radius when it happens. Most people who watch this will do nothing. Not because they don't care, because they don't know where to start. Earth Attacks put together a free guide on exactly what to do when natural disasters like this strike. What to have ready, what to do first, what most people get wrong. This video explains the crisis. The guide explains what to do when disaster reaches your door. Earth Attacks broke down the practical steps for preparing before volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and other rapid onset emergencies. No fear-mongering, just the actual checklist.